The darkness of space lit up with 300 alien warships as they emerged at the edge of the solar system. Each vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers in length, their hulls covered in bioorganic armor that pulsed with a sickly green light. Grand Admiral Karthek stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small blue planet in the distance. He had conquered 47 worlds across the galaxy, and this one would be no different. His tactical officer approached with the formal conquest declaration ready for transmission. President Helen Morris sat in the emergency command center deep beneath Washington. The message from the aliens had arrived 3 hours ago, and every world leader was now connected through secure channels. The translation was crude but clear enough. Surrender in 7 days or face complete destruction. She looked at the faces on the screens around her. Admiral John Blake commanded the entire Earth Navy, all 63 combat vessels that humanity had managed to build in the past 30 years. General Lisa Harper controlled ground forces that seemed useless against an enemy in space. Neither of them looked afraid, which gave Helen some comfort. Admiral Blake spoke first, his voice steady despite the situation. The alien fleet outnumbered them 5-1, and their ships were larger and likely more powerful. He recommended a defensive position around Earth and Mars, protecting the civilian populations while buying time. General Harper disagreed immediately. She wanted to strike first, hit them before they could organize their attack. The argument went back and forth while Helen listened. She knew both of them were wrong. Defense would only delay the inevitable, and attacking with inferior numbers was suicide. There had to be another way. Dr. Marcus Webb was already working on that other way. His laboratory at the International Space Institute had intercepted every communication from the alien fleet. The computers were translating and analyzing the data, looking for weaknesses and patterns. What Marcus found was interesting. The aliens spoke about war like it was a game with rules. They mentioned honor challenges and formal combat protocols. They talked about accepting surrender and integrating conquered species into their empire. It was all very civilized and completely stupid. Marcus had spent his entire career studying human history as much as alien biology. He knew what civilized warfare meant. It meant the aliens had never fought an enemy that truly wanted to kill them. Commander Kate Sullivan received her orders at 400 hours. Her ship, the Valiant, was one of the newest in the Earth fleet. It was fast, heavily armed, and equipped with the best sensors humanity could build. Her mission was simple on paper but deadly in practice. Get close to the alien fleet, scan everything possible, and return with intelligence. Her crew assembled in the briefing room. Ryan Cole handled tactical systems and had a mind like a computer for calculating firing solutions. Maya Santos kept the engines running and could repair anything with whatever materials she had available. Peter Grant managed communications and spoke 6 languages, though none of them were alien. They were a good crew, and Kate trusted them with her life. The Valiant left Earth orbit silently, running dark with all non-essential systems powered down. It took them 18 hours to reach the outer edge of the solar system, where the alien fleet waited. Kate ordered the ship to drift, using minimal thrusters to adjust their position. The aliens had to know they were there, but maybe they would see one small ship as no threat. Ryan began his scans immediately, cataloging every vessel type and weapon system he could identify. Maya monitored their power signatures, looking for reactor designs and propulsion methods. Peter listened to their communications, recording everything for the translation computers back home. Grand Admiral Karthek did notice the small human vessel. He found it amusing that they sent such a tiny ship to observe his magnificent fleet. It reminded him of how the Kelvari had responded to his arrival at their world. They too had sent scouts to examine his ships before surrendering. The Kelvari were now productive members of the Empire, working in factories and farms, grateful to be part of something larger than their single world. Humans would learn the same lesson. His species, the Xanthari, had brought order to 47 civilizations. This would be 48. Back on Earth, Dr. Alan Foster stood before the hastiest assembled council of world leaders in history. Alan was a historian who specialized in military conflicts, and what he had to say was not comforting. He pulled up a holographic timeline that stretched back 10,000 years. Every red mark represented a major war, and there were hundreds of them. Thousands if he included smaller conflicts. He zoomed in on the 20th century alone, and the display turned almost completely red. 2 world wars, dozens of regional conflicts, proxy wars, civil wars, and countless battles. He explained that humanity was unique among intelligent species. They had never stopped fighting. Every generation had war. Every nation had armies. Every child learned history through the lens of conflict. President Morris listened to Alan's presentation and felt something shift in her mind. The aliens thought they were conquering just another peaceful civilization. They had no idea what humans actually were. She stood up and addressed the council directly. Earth would not surrender, and they would not fight a defensive war. They would show the Zenthari what happened when you attacked a species that had spent 10 millennia perfecting the art of killing. Admiral Blake started to protest, but Helen cut him off. She ordered him to prepare every vessel for combat. She ordered General Harper to mobilize every defense platform, every satellite weapon, and every ground installation. She ordered Dr. Webb to find weaknesses in the alien technology and exploit them without mercy. Commander Sullivan's reconnaissance mission lasted 36 hours before she received the recall order. Her crew had gathered massive amounts of data, and what they found was both encouraging and terrifying. The alien ships were powerful but designed for specific types of combat. Their formations were ceremonial, meant to intimidate rather than provide tactical advantage. Their weapons had long recharge cycles, suggesting they expected to fire once and have their enemy surrender. Their shields were incredibly strong but slow to reset after taking damage. Ryan had calculated at least a dozen ways to exploit these weaknesses, but all of them required getting close enough to attack. Very close. The Valiant returned to Earth as the alien countdown reached its final day. Grand Admiral Carthex prepared his ceremonial challenge, a tradition where he would send one ship to face one defender in ritual combat. The winner would determine the terms of surrender. It was how civilized species conducted warfare. It minimized casualties and established clear dominance. He selected his finest captain for the honor. The challenge vessel departed the fleet, its weapons powered but set to ceremonial levels, just enough to disable an enemy ship without destroying it. Captain Greg Mitchell received the alien challenge ship on his scanners. His vessel, the Defiant, was a cruiser designed for direct combat. His crew was ready. Nicole Barnes sat at the helm, her hands steady on the controls. Luke Harrison manned the weapons station, targeting systems already locked on the approaching alien ship. Sophie Chen analyzed the tactical situation, feeding data to everyone in real time. Greg opened a channel to Earth Command and requested clarification of engagement rules. The response came back immediately from Admiral Blake himself. There were no rules. The aliens had given Earth 7 days to surrender or die. That timeline had ended. The aliens had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. The alien ceremonial vessel fired first, a measured beam of energy designed to disable the Defiant's shields. The shot was precise and controlled, exactly as protocol demanded. It struck a glancing blow that did minimal damage. Captain Mitchell's response was not ceremonial. Luke Harrison fired every weapon the Defiant carried in a single devastating salvo. Railgun rounds moving at a fraction of light speed punched through the alien shields like they were paper. Nuclear-tipped missiles with AI guidance systems swarmed the enemy vessel from 6 different angles. Electromagnetic pulse weapons overloaded the alien ship's organic technology. The entire engagement lasted 90 seconds. When the weapons fire cleared, the alien ceremonial vessel was gone. Not disabled, not surrendered. Gone. Reduced to expanding clouds of superheated gas and debris. Grand Admiral Carthex watched his screen in absolute silence. His finest captain was dead. His ceremonial vessel was destroyed. The humans had not followed any protocol. They had not shown any honor. They had simply attacked with overwhelming force and total commitment to destruction. For the first time in his long military career, Carthex felt something he had not experienced since he was young. He felt fear. The small blue planet in the distance suddenly seemed much more dangerous than he had calculated. His tactical officer approached cautiously and asked what orders should be given. Carthex stared at the debris field where his ship had been and realized he had made a terrible mistake. These humans were not like the other species. They did not fight with honor. They fought to win. Grand Admiral Carthex convened his war council within the hour. The ceremonial challenge had failed in the worst way possible, and now he needed to understand what kind of enemy he was facing. Strategic Commander Velthar arrived first, followed by Fleet Coordinator Zendrix and a dozen other senior officers. They gathered in the command chamber where holographic displays showed the debris field where their ship had been. Carthex ordered a complete analysis of the human attack. The data was disturbing. The humans had used at least 6 different weapon systems simultaneously, each one designed to overwhelm a specific defense. This was not the action of a primitive species. This was calculated destruction by an enemy that understood warfare at a level the Zenthari had never encountered. Commander Kate Sullivan was already preparing for the next phase. Her reconnaissance data was being analyzed by every military computer on Earth, and the results were being distributed to all combat vessels. She sat in the briefing room with Admiral Blake and a dozen other ship captains. The Admiral pointed to the holographic display showing the alien fleet formation. It was impressive to look at, but tactically foolish. The ships were arranged in concentric circles, each layer providing covering fire for the ones inside. It looked intimidating, and it would work perfectly against an enemy that attacked from one direction. But space was 3-dimensional, and humans had been fighting in 3 dimensions since the first aircraft took to the skies over 100 years ago. Admiral Blake outlined the battle plan. They would not engage the aliens in a direct fleet confrontation where numbers would determine the outcome. Instead, they would force the aliens to split their forces by attacking from multiple vectors simultaneously. Captain Danny Rogers would lead the carrier Horizon and its strike fighters. Rachel Stone, Chris Palmer, and Julie Marks would each command destroyer groups that would hit the alien fleet from different angles. The goal was not to destroy the alien fleet in one battle. The goal was to make them react, make them chase, and lead them into positions where humanity's advantages could be exploited. Dr. Marcus Webb was working on a different kind of weapon. His team had analyzed the alien ship fragments recovered from the destroyed ceremonial vessel, and what they found was fascinating. The Zenthari used biotechnology for almost everything. Their computers were organic neural networks. Their hull armor was living tissue that could repair itself. Their weapons used biological energy cells. It was elegant and efficient, but it had one massive weakness. Biological systems could get sick. Marcus had already identified 3 terrestrial viruses that could potentially infect the alien technology. His team was working around the clock to modify them into a weapon that could spread through the alien fleet's interconnected systems. President Helen Morris addressed the world from the Emergency Command Center. Her speech was broadcast on every network and translated into every language. She explained that Earth would not surrender and would not negotiate. The aliens had given humanity a week to give up their freedom or face death. Now humanity would show them what death really looked like. She promised that every resource, every weapon, and every person would be dedicated to victory. There would be no half measures. There would be no mercy for an enemy that offered none. The speech lasted only 5 minutes, but it galvanized the entire planet. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Factories shifted to war production. Everyone understood that this was existential. Captain Greg Mitchell was being treated as a hero, but he felt nothing of the sort. He had killed an alien crew that probably thought they were engaging in some kind of ritual combat. He watched the engagement recording for the 100th time, studying the moment his weapons destroyed the alien vessel. His crew gathered around him. Nicole Barnes told him he had done what was necessary. Luke Harrison said he had followed orders perfectly. Sophie Chen showed him the analysis that proved the alien ship was about to fire again, this time at a civilian transport that had wandered too close to the combat zone. That made Greg feel slightly better, but only slightly. War was supposed to be soldiers against soldiers, not ceremonies turned into slaughter. But then again, the aliens had threatened to destroy Earth. What did honor matter when survival was at stake? Grand Admiral Carthex made his decision. The humans wanted war, and he would give it to them. He ordered his fleet to advance into the inner solar system. The ceremonial approach was over. Now they would demonstrate the full power of the Zenthari Empire. His 300 warships began moving in formation, their engines creating a brilliant display as they accelerated. The plan was simple. They would establish orbital superiority around Earth, destroy any military installations, and force the humans to surrender by threatening their cities. It was a standard conquest protocol that had worked 47 times before. Carthex saw no reason why it would fail now. Commander Sullivan detected the alien advance within minutes. The entire fleet was moving together, maintaining their formation like they were on parade. She immediately forwarded the data to Admiral Blake, who smiled for the first time since the crisis began. The aliens were doing exactly what he had hoped. They were committing their entire force to a single objective, which meant they could be maneuvered and controlled. He gave the order to execute Operation Hammerstrike. Every Earth vessel received their assignment simultaneously. Captain Rogers launched his strike fighters from the horizon. The destroyer groups under Stone, Palmer, and Marks broke formation and scattered in different directions. The defense platforms orbiting Earth and Mars armed their weapons. Everything was ready. The alien fleet entered the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and that was when the trap sprang. Commander Jake Foster had spent 3 days attaching fusion drives to carefully selected asteroids. His mining vessels were not military ships, but they knew how to move rock, and they had moved a lot of it. When the alien fleet passed the predetermined point, Foster activated the drives. Asteroids the size of mountains began accelerating toward the alien formation from 6 different angles. The Xanthari detected them immediately, but there was no time to react. Their fleet was tightly packed, and maneuvering such large vessels required time and space. They had neither. The first asteroid struck an alien battleship dead center, punching through its shields and hull like they were not there. The kinetic energy was so enormous that the ship simply disintegrated. The second and third asteroids hit a cluster of cruisers, destroying 5 vessels in a single impact. The alien formation broke apart as ships tried desperately to avoid the incoming rocks. Some succeeded, but many did not. In the span of 10 minutes, the Xanthari lost 47 ships. Not damaged. Not disabled. Destroyed completely. The survivors scattered, their tight formation broken, their confidence shattered. Admiral Blake did not give them time to recover. Captain Rogers launched his strike fighters while the aliens were still reeling. The small, fast attack craft swarmed into the confused alien fleet like hornets. Each fighter carried missiles and railguns, but more importantly, they carried pilots who had trained for this moment their entire lives. Nicole Barnes led one squadron, weaving through alien fire with movements that seemed impossible. The alien targeting systems could not track such erratic and aggressive flying. They were designed for ship-to-ship combat where vessels moved predictably. They had never faced enemy craft that flew like Earth's atmosphere-borne fighters adapted for space. The destroyer groups hit next. Rachel Stone's ships attacked from above the orbital plane. Chris Palmer came from below. Julie Marks hit them from the side. Each group fired and then moved, never staying in one place long enough for the aliens to concentrate their return fire. The Xanthari tried to reform their battle line, but every time they started to organize, another attack came from a different direction. Their weapons were powerful, but they were slow to recharge and required time to aim. Human weapons were smaller but fired continuously, and human ships moved constantly. Grand Admiral Carthex watched his fleet being torn apart and could not understand how it was happening. His ships were superior in every measurable way. His weapons were more powerful. His shields were stronger. His crews were trained in the finest military traditions of the Empire. But none of that mattered because the humans were not fighting the way warfare was supposed to be fought. They used asteroids as weapons. They attacked from every direction at once. Their small fighters moved like they were alive. Nothing in his experience or training had prepared him for this. Strategic Commander Velthar reported that they had lost 92 ships in the past hour. Almost a third of the fleet was gone. The humans had lost only 6 vessels. The math was impossible, but the results were undeniable. Velthar recommended immediate withdrawal to regroup and develop new tactics. Fleet Coordinator Zendrix argued for pushing forward, claiming that retreat would be dishonorable and encourage the humans. Carthex listened to both arguments and realized something terrible. Honor did not matter. Tradition did not matter. The only thing that mattered was survival, and his fleet was dying. President Helen Morris watched the battle reports coming in from Admiral Blake. Earth was winning, but she knew this was only the beginning. The aliens still had over 200. The disabled Xanthari cruiser drifted in space, its hull breached in 3 places and its power systems fluctuating. Commander Kate Sullivan brought the Valiant alongside carefully, matching the alien vessel's spin and velocity. Her boarding team assembled in the airlock, each member wearing heavy combat armor and carrying enough weapons to fight a small war. Lieutenant Amy Brooks led the tactical squad with Ben Crawford handling technical systems, Laura Kim ready with medical supplies, and Tony Martinez specializing in infiltration and reconnaissance. Kate gave the final briefing. Their mission was to get in, access the alien computer systems, take whatever samples they could carry, and get out before the ship's reactor went critical or the aliens sent reinforcements. The breach was easier than expected. Hyacinthos used a plasma cutter to open a hole in the alien hull, and the team pushed through into darkness. Their helmet lights revealed corridors made of the same organic material as the ship's exterior. The walls pulsed with faint bioluminescence, and the air was thick with a smell like rotting vegetation. Ben Crawford immediately started scanning for computer access points while Tony Martinez moved ahead to scout for survivors or threats. They found both. 3 Xanthari crew members huddled in what looked like a control room, injured but alive. Laura Kim approached with her medical scanner, but the aliens recoiled in fear. They had clearly never expected humans to board their vessel. Amy Brooks tried to communicate using the translation device Peter Grant had provided. The results were crude but functional. She explained that they were not there to kill anyone, just to access the ship's systems. The aliens seemed confused by this concept. In their experience, boarding parties came to take prisoners or secure surrenders, not to steal information. One of the Xanthari, who identified himself as Engineer Sorkal, finally agreed to help. He was bleeding from a wound on his side and clearly understood that cooperation was his best chance of survival. He led them to the main computer core, a massive chamber filled with what looked like giant brains suspended in fluid tanks. Ben Crawford stared at the technology for a moment, before understanding hit him. The entire ship's computer was a living neural network, billions of neurons working together to process information. He connected his portable interface and started downloading everything he could access. The data transfer was slow because the alien system was so different from human technology, but it was working. Sorkal watched with something like resignation on his alien features. He asked Amy why humans fought so viciously, when they could have just surrendered and joined the Empire. Amy looked at him and gave an answer that she hoped would translate properly. Humans did not surrender because surrendering meant giving up freedom, and freedom was worth dying for. Back on Earth, Dr. Marcus Webb received the first data transmission from Sullivan's team. His computers began analyzing the alien technology, and what they found exceeded every expectation. The Xanthari biotechnology was incredibly advanced but also incredibly vulnerable. Their neural networks used organic compounds that were susceptible to dozens of terrestrial pathogens. Webb immediately began work on a modified virus, something that would spread through the alien fleet's interconnected systems and cause cascade failures. It would not kill the crews, but it would disable their ships completely. He estimated 18 hours until he had a working prototype. Grand Admiral Carthex received reports of the boarding action and made a decision that would have been unthinkable a week ago. He ordered his fleet to abandon the disabled vessel and any crew still aboard. Saving them would require diverting ships that he needed for defense, and he could not afford to lose more vessels. The realization that he was sacrificing his own people for tactical advantage made him physically ill. This was not how the Xanthari conducted warfare. This was not honorable. But the humans had taught him that honor was a luxury only the winning side could afford. Admiral Blake pressed his advantage relentlessly. Captain Danny Rogers continued his fighter strikes, hitting supply vessels and support ships that the aliens needed to maintain their fleet. Rachel Stone's destroyers targeted the alien communication relays, cutting off coordination between different sections of their fleet. Chris Palmer focused on the enemy's command ships, forcing them to constantly relocate to avoid destruction. Julie Marks led attacks on their sensor arrays, blinding them to human movements. Each action was small, but together they were destroying the Xanthari's ability to function as a unified force. President Helen Morris received a communication request from the Xanthari. Ambassador Keltar appeared on the screen, his alien features showing what might have been exhaustion or fear. He spoke through the translation software, asking for negotiations and offering a ceasefire. Helen listened to his entire proposal before responding. She told him that Earth would accept only one outcome: the complete withdrawal of all Xanthari forces from the solar system, with a guarantee that they would never return. Keltar tried to explain that such terms were impossible, that his empire would see it as a humiliating defeat. Helen's response was cold and final. The Xanthari should have thought about humiliation before they threatened to destroy Earth and kill billions of humans. Commander, Sullivan's team finished their data collection and prepared to evacuate the disabled alien vessel. Engineer Sorkal asked if he could come with them. He explained that he would be seen as a traitor for helping humans, and would likely be executed if recovered by his own people. Amy Brooks looked at Kate Sullivan, who made the decision quickly. They would take him. He might be useful for understanding alien technology, and leaving him to die seemed unnecessarily cruel. The team made their way back to the breach point with Sorkal moving slowly due to his injuries. Laura Kim helped support him while the others provided security. They were almost to the Valiant when the alien vessel shuddered. Ben Crawford checked his scanner and swore. The reactor was going critical faster than predicted. They had maybe 5 minutes before the entire ship exploded. Kate ordered everyone to move faster, practically dragging Sorkal through the breach. Maya Santos had the Valiant ready, engines hot and airlocks open. The team piled through and Maya disengaged the moment the last person was aboard. The Valiant accelerated away at maximum thrust, just as the alien cruiser's reactor reached cascade failure. The explosion was visible for millions of kilometers, a brief new sun in the darkness of space. General, Lisa Harper watched the orbital defense. Platforms track another group of alien ships trying to approach Earth. The Zenthari were attempting landing operations, probably hoping to establish ground positions and turn this into a planetary invasion. Lisa almost felt sorry for them. They clearly had no idea what they were attempting. She gave the order to let them land. Every military commander on Earth knew the old wisdom. Never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. The aliens wanted a ground war, and humanity had spent thousands of years perfecting ground warfare. The first alien landing craft touched down in a remote area of what used to be called Nevada. Colonel Frank Morris commanded the defense forces in that sector, and he had prepared a welcome that the Zenthari would never forget. The aliens deployed in formation, their soldiers wearing biomechanical armor and carrying energy weapons. They moved like they were on parade, textbook military doctrine that would have impressed any academy instructor. Frank waited until they were fully committed and exposed before giving the order to fire. Artillery shells landed among the alien formation, each one containing cluster munitions that spread destruction across a wide area. The Zenthari shields protected them from the initial blast, but then the drones came. Thousands of small autonomous attack drones swarmed the landing zone, each one carrying explosives and targeting systems. The aliens shot down hundreds, but there were always more. Their formation broke as individuals tried to find cover that did not exist. Then the human soldiers attacked from 3 sides simultaneously, using terrain and smoke for concealment. The battle lasted 40 minutes. No Zenthari survived. Grand Admiral Carthex received the report of the failed landing and felt something inside him break. His fleet was being destroyed in space. His ground forces were being slaughtered on the planet. His technology was being stolen and analyzed. Everything that made the Zenthari Empire powerful meant nothing against these humans. He accessed Earth's information networks, something he should have done before ever entering this system. What he found there would haunt him for the rest of his life. Thousands of years of human history, and almost all of it was war. The 100 Years' War, the Napoleonic Wars, the World Wars where humans killed each other by the millions, the Cold War where they built weapons capable of destroying their own planet. Every human child studied military history. Their entertainment was filled with combat and conflict. They had turned warfare into a science and violence into an art form. Strategic Commander Velthar approached with the latest casualty reports. The fleet was down to 190 functional ships. Losses were accelerating. Morale was collapsing. Some captains were requesting permission to withdraw individually, breaking the unity of the fleet. Velthar asked what orders should be given. Carthex stared at the blue planet that had. The Valiant approached the alien fleet using a debris field for cover. Commander Kate Sullivan kept the ship's power signature as low as possible, while still maintaining enough thrust to maneuver. The special missile sat in the launch tube, ready to deliver Dr. Webb's biological weapon to the heart of the Zenthari formation. Ryan Cole monitored the alien sensor sweeps, timing their movements to coincide with gaps in the enemy's detection grid. Maya Santos had the engines ready to push maximum thrust the moment they launched the missile, because getting away would be just as important as getting close. Peter Grant maintained communication silence, but had his systems ready to broadcast their success the moment the weapon deployed. Grand Admiral Carthex stood on his bridge, watching his fleet try to reorganize after the devastating losses. The humans had stopped their direct attacks an hour ago, which made him more nervous than when they were actively fighting. He had learned that humans were at their most dangerous when they appeared to be doing nothing. Strategic Commander Velthar suggested that perhaps the humans were regrouping or had exhausted their ammunition. Carthex did not believe that for a moment. The humans were planning something, and whatever it was would be worse than anything they had done so far. The Valiant reached its launch position, barely 300 kilometers from the nearest alien battleship. Kate gave the order and Ryan fired the missile. It streaked away from their ship, its small profile making it difficult to detect among all the debris and wreckage floating in the area. The missile had no explosive warhead, no kinetic penetrator, just a payload of modified viruses designed to infect biotechnology. It reached the alien battleship and detonated, spreading millions of viral particles across the vessel's hull. The infected particles began working immediately, finding microscopic gaps in the armor and penetrating into the ship's systems. Maya Santos already had the Valiant accelerating away at maximum thrust when the aliens finally detected their presence. Energy beams lashed out, missing by meters as the small Earthship jinked and weaved. One shot clipped their stern shield, causing alarms to blare throughout the ship. But they were fast and they were small, and the alien targeting system still could not adjust to such erratic movement. Within 2 minutes, they were out of effective weapons range and headed back toward Earth's defensive perimeter. Kate allowed herself a moment of relief before checking on her crew. Everyone was shaken but unhurt. Engineer Sorkal had strapped himself into the medical bay and looked terrified but alive. The biological weapon began spreading through the infected battleship's neural networks. The ship's systems detected the intrusion and tried to fight it off, but the virus had been specifically designed to bypass alien immune responses. Within 15 minutes, the battleship's main computer started experiencing cascade failures. Weapon systems went offline. Propulsion flickered. Life support began cycling erratically. The crew panicked and sent distress signals to other ships in the fleet. Those ships responded by establishing data connections to help diagnose the problem. And in doing so, they infected themselves. Dr. Marcus Webb watched the telemetry from his laboratory and allowed himself a smile. The virus was spreading exactly as predicted, jumping from ship to ship through their interconnected networks. The Zenthari biotechnology that had seemed so advanced was now their greatest weakness. Within an hour, 15 ships were experiencing system failures. Within 2 hours, it was 50 ships. The spread was exponential, and there was no way to stop it without completely shutting down their entire fleet's computer network. And if they did that, they would be helpless in space. Grand Admiral Carthex finally understood what was happening when his own flagship systems began showing infection signs. The humans had not attacked with missiles or railguns or any conventional weapon. They had attacked with something the Zenthari had never encountered, because they had never fought an enemy that understood biological warfare. He ordered all ships to disconnect from the network immediately, but it was too late for most of them. Over half his remaining fleet was already infected, and the number was climbing every minute. He watched in horror as ship after ship reported complete system failures. Admiral John Blake received confirmation that the biological weapon was working beyond expectations. He immediately ordered the conventional fleet to press the attack while the aliens were crippled. Captain Danny Rogers launched every fighter he had. Rachel Stone's destroyers moved in for close-range attacks. Chris Palmer targeted the ships that were still functional, forcing them to choose between fighting or trying to help their infected companions. Julie Marks led her group against the alien command vessels, hoping to capture or kill Carthex himself. The battle became a slaughter as human forces tore through the disabled alien fleet. President Helen Morris watched the battle reports with mixed emotions. Victory was now certain, but the cost had been high. Earth had lost 17 ships and over 3,000 personnel. Thousands more were wounded. Cities had been damaged by falling debris from destroyed vessels. The economic impact would take years to recover from, but they had survived, and the alien threat was being eliminated. She prepared a statement for the people of Earth, knowing that this moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Commander Sullivan brought the Valiant back to Earth orbit and was immediately directed to dock with the orbital command station. Admiral Blake wanted to debrief her personally and meet the alien engineer they had rescued. Kate and her crew were exhausted, but they made their way to the station conference room where Blake was waiting. He congratulated them on a mission that had turned the entire war in humanity's favor. Then he turned his attention to Sorkal, who stood nervously between armed guards. Engineer Sorkal spoke through the translation device. his voice carrying tones that suggested both fear and resignation. He explained that the Zenthari Empire had never encountered a species like humanity. They had conquered 47 worlds, but all of them had been peaceful civilizations that valued life above conflict. The Empire's entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and the assumption that their enemies would surrender rather than face destruction. They had rituals and protocols for everything, turning war into something predictable and controlled. Humans had no such limitations. Humans treated war as something to be won by any means necessary. Admiral Blake listened and then asked the question that mattered most. What would the Zenthari do now? Would they send more fleets? Would they seek revenge? Sorkal considered the question carefully before answering. The Empire would not send more forces, because the High Council would not believe what had happened here. The loss of 300 ships to a single primitive world would seem impossible. But once they understood the truth, once they realized what humans were capable of, they would do something the Empire had never done before. They would leave Earth alone out of fear rather than respect. General Lisa Harper reported on the ground battles. The Zenthari had attempted 7 more landing operations, and all 7 had been complete disasters for the aliens. Human forces had destroyed every landing force with minimal casualties. The alien soldiers were trained and equipped well enough, but they had no experience with the kind of brutal, chaotic ground combat that humans had perfected over millennia. They expected organized battles with clear lines and honorable engagement. Instead, they got ambushes, artillery strikes, drone swarms, and soldiers who used every dirty trick ever invented. The aliens never stood a chance. Captain Emma Price commanded the battleship Retribution as it moved through the crippled alien fleet. Her orders were to disable any ships that were still functional and accept surrender from any that offered it. Most of the Zenthari vessels were already dead in space, their crews trapped inside ships that no longer responded to commands. Some aliens were evacuating in escape pods, hoping that humans would pick them up rather than leave them to die in space. Emma gave orders to recover the pods. There was no point in killing helpless survivors, and they might provide useful intelligence. Strike fighter pilot Scott Hayes led his squadron through the wreckage of what had been the mightiest fleet the Zenthari Empire had ever assembled. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers, a graveyard of alien ambition and human determination. He thought about the pilots they had lost during the battle, friends who would never go home. War was terrible even when you won, maybe especially when you won, because victory meant you had to live with what you had done to achieve it. Grand Admiral Karthek sat in his command chair and watched his fleet die around him. His flagship was one of the few ships still functioning, protected by isolation from the network during the critical moments of infection. He had perhaps 20 ships left that could still fight, out of the 300 he had brought to this cursed system. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. The Empire would never trust him with command again, assuming they did not execute him for this catastrophic failure. But more than his personal fate, he worried about what this defeat meant for the Zenthari people. They had believed themselves superior, destined to bring order to the galaxy. Now they knew there was at least one species out there that will. The Zenthari High Council received Grand Admiral Karthex's transmission from across the galaxy. Council leader Drakon watched the message 3 times before calling an emergency session. What he saw was impossible to believe. 300 warships reduced to fewer than 20 functional vessels. Thousands of warriors dead. The mightiest fleet the Empire had ever assembled, broken by a single world that had not even developed faster than light travel. The other council members argued that it must be some kind of trick or exaggeration. Drakon silenced them and played the battle recordings that Karthex had included. The footage showed asteroids used as weapons, small attack craft moving with impossible agility, and worst of all, a biological weapon that turned their own technology against them. The council chamber fell silent as they watched their proud fleet being systematically destroyed. President Helen Morris stood before the cameras to address not just Earth but the entire galaxy. The Zenthari had been forced to broadcast humanity's message as part of their surrender terms, which meant every species with radio technology would hear what she had to say. She spoke clearly and without emotion about what had happened. The Zenthari Empire had demanded Earth's surrender and threatened to destroy humanity if they refused. Earth had refused and then demonstrated exactly why that threat was a mistake. She explained that humans were not a peaceful species. They had spent 10,000 years fighting each other. perfecting weapons and tactics, turning warfare into something approaching a science. Any species that attacked Earth would face the same fate as the Zenthari. But she also made clear that humans had no interest in conquest or empire. They wanted to be left alone to develop in peace. Attack them and face destruction. Leave them alone and there would be no conflict. Admiral John Blake supervised the prisoner exchange in orbit above Earth. Thousands of Zenthari survivors were being transferred from human custody back to their remaining ships. The aliens looked defeated and traumatized, their confidence shattered by the experience of fighting humanity. Blake watched them file through the airlocks and felt no satisfaction in their misery. War was never something to celebrate, even when you won. His own casualties were being returned to Earth for burial or treatment. 17 ships lost and 3,000 dead was a heavy price, though it could have been much worse. He thought about the families who would receive notifications, the children who would grow up without parents, the partners who would grieve. Victory never felt as good as people expected. Dr. Marcus Webb met with Engineer Sorkal in a laboratory that had been converted into a diplomatic space. The alien had agreed to share information about Zenthari technology in exchange for asylum on Earth. He could never return to his own people after helping humans, and he seemed resigned to spending the rest of his life among the species that had destroyed his fleet. Marcus asked why the Zenthari used biotechnology for everything, when it had such obvious vulnerabilities. Sorkal explained that his people had never encountered biological warfare before. The concept of using disease as a weapon was foreign to every species in the Empire. They fought with energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, not with viruses and pathogens. It had simply never occurred to them that an enemy would think to attack their technology in such a way. Commander Kate Sullivan received a commendation from Admiral Blake for her role in deploying the biological weapon, but she felt strange about accepting it. She had essentially infected an entire fleet with a plague that disabled their ships and left them helpless. It was effective and it saved lives by ending the war quickly, but it still felt wrong somehow. Ryan Cole told her she was overthinking it. They had been at war and she had used the weapons available to win that war. Maya Santos agreed, pointing out that the virus had not killed anyone, just disabled their ships. Peter Grant remained quiet on the subject. Kate suspected he had his own doubts about what they had done. Grand Admiral Carthax prepared to depart the solar system with what remained of his fleet. 23 ships out of 300, barely enough to make the journey home. He had sent his full report to the High Council, including every detail of how the humans had fought. He hoped it would serve as a warning that would prevent future disasters. The humans had taught him that warfare was not about honor or tradition or following proper protocols. Warfare was about survival, and species that treated it as anything else would not survive long against truly dangerous enemies. The Zenthari had been lucky in their expansion, conquering worlds populated by peaceful civilizations. That luck had run out the moment they encountered humanity. General Lisa Harper conducted the final assessment of Earth's defenses. The ground installations had performed well, though they had barely been tested since the aliens never managed a successful landing. The orbital platforms had been effective, but several needed repairs or replacement. The fleet had suffered significant losses that would take years to rebuild. But overall, Earth's defensive strategy had worked. The key had been forcing the aliens to fight on human terms rather than accepting their ritualized approach to warfare. Future enemies would be more difficult, because they would learn from the Zenthari's mistakes. Harper began planning for that future, knowing that Earth's victory had announced their presence to the galaxy in the loudest way possible. Council leader Dracon made contact with President Morris directly, something unprecedented in the Empire's history. He spoke formally through translation software, offering apologies and reparations for the unprovoked attack on Earth. He explained that the Empire had been expanding for centuries without encountering serious resistance, and they had grown arrogant in their assumption of superiority. Humanity had taught them a lesson that would reshape their entire civilization. Morris accepted his apology but made clear that Earth would not forget what had happened. Any future Zenthari vessel that entered the solar system without explicit permission would be destroyed without warning. Dracon agreed to these terms and promised that the Empire would add Earth to the list of forbidden systems. Dr. Alan Foster published his analysis of the war for academic records. His paper examined why humanity had won despite being outnumbered and technologically inferior in some areas. The conclusion was simple. Humans understood violence in a way that peaceful species could not. They had evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill them, from predators to diseases to other humans. They had survived ice ages and natural disasters and countless wars. Every human child learned history through the lens of conflict. Every nation maintained military forces even during peacetime. The capacity for organized violence was woven into human culture so deeply that they barely noticed it. Other species saw war as an unfortunate necessity. Humans saw it as just another problem to solve with the same dedication they applied to everything else. Captain Emma Price supervised the salvage operations in the debris field. Hundreds of wrecked alien ships floated in space, representing both a graveyard and a treasure trove of technology. Human crews carefully extracted anything useful, while respecting the alien dead still trapped in some vessels. Emma ordered that any remains found be preserved and returned to the Zenthari, as part of the peace agreement. It was the decent thing to do, and humanity needed to show the galaxy that they could be honorable even after such a brutal conflict. The salvage technology would give Earth scientists decades of research material and potentially advance human civilization by centuries. Engineer Sorkal helped Dr. Webb understand the Zenthari technology, explaining the principles behind their biotechnology and faster-than-light travel. He worked willingly, seeming to find purpose in helping the species that had defeated his own people. When Webb asked why he was being so cooperative, Sorkal gave an answer that the translation software struggled to render properly. Something about accepting reality and choosing to be useful rather than bitter. He had seen enough of human determination to know that they would eventually figure out the technology anyway. By helping them, he could ensure they understood it properly and perhaps prevent accidents. Admiral Blake met with all the ship captains who had survived the battle. Danny Rogers, Rachel Stone, Chris Palmer, Julie Marks, and dozens of others gathered in the orbital command station. Blake thanked them for their service and announced that Earth would be building a new fleet, larger and more powerful than before. The victory over the Zenthari had proven that humanity could defend itself, but it had also revealed how vulnerable they still were. The next enemy might be smarter, might learn from Zenthari mistakes, might bring an even larger fleet. Earth needed to be ready for that possibility. Several captains volunteered immediately to command new vessels. Others requested time to recover from the trauma of the recent battle. Blake approved all requests. They had earned the right to choose their own paths. President Morris received reports from cities around the world. People were celebrating in the streets, relieved that the threat was over and proud of what humanity had accomplished. But there were also memorial services for those who had died, and hospitals full of wounded personnel. The war had lasted less than 2 weeks, but its impact would be felt for generations. Children who had watched the battles on screens would grow up,